There comes a moment when the surface of life cracks, and through that fracture, reality begins to bleed. What once felt solid starts to dissolve. The colors of the world fade into something rawer, truer, almost unbearable. You begin to feel existence, not just think it. The beauty, the pain, the absurdity, all of it rushes in at once, unfiltered. And in that rush, you understand why most people spend their lives asleep. Because to touch what is real costs something. It asks for everything you thought you were. Carl Jung wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. The truth is, awakening doesn't start with peace. It starts with exposure. To see the machinery of the world, the repetition of human fear, the hollowness behind collective ideals, is to feel both clarity and grief. You realize that comfort was built on illusion, and illusion was built on denial. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you feel it, you can't return to numbness. There is a loneliness in this kind of perception. You walk through the same streets, hear the same laughter, but something in you no longer belongs. You've stepped out of the shared dream, and the air feels thinner out here. Awareness stretches you open, and everything, and joy, sorrow, love, death, enters at full force. The cost of seeing reality is that you lose the privilege of avoidance. You can't hide in distraction anymore. The mirror of truth follows you everywhere. Yet beneath that ache, something sacred stirs. Feeling what is real means you've begun to live without filters, without anesthesia. You've stopped confusing numbness for peace. This is the threshold of awakening, the moment where perception becomes devotion. The question is not whether you can handle the truth, but whether you can remain open once you've seen it. If you've ever felt this quiet dislocation, like the world became too real, too loud, too alive, tell me in the comments. Subscribe. Stay close. Because what follows is both the pain and the power of never looking away again. It doesn't happen all at once. The illusion doesn't shatter with thunder. It dissolves like mist under sunlight. One day, something small, a conversation, a silence, a failure, reveals a crack in the familiar pattern. You see how much of life is performance, how deeply we depend on stories to make chaos feel coherent. Then suddenly the veil lifts, and what was hidden becomes obvious. You realize the world you called reality was mostly a projection of your mind, a delicate arrangement of fears and desires pretending to be truth. This is the moment the illusion breaks. It is not romantic. It feels like loss. You begin to notice how fragile meaning is, how every belief trembles under the weight of awareness. The structures that once guided you, religion, ambition, love, no longer fit. You feel naked in front of existence, exposed to its silence. Jung wrote that a complete loss of faith is sometimes the precondition for real knowledge. That is what this moment is, a death, not of life, but of false certainty. The mind panics. It tries to rebuild the old world with new ideas, new philosophies, anything to fill the void. But nothing works. Because the illusion didn't die to punish you, it died to invite you. Behind the collapse lies the possibility of direct experience, unmediated by belief. What you used to call meaning was a filter. Without it, reality feels unbearable at first, but also stunningly alive. The smallest things, the sound of rain, a breath, a stranger's eyes, begin to shimmer with quiet intensity. This breaking is not destruction, it's revelation. The world hasn't changed, your eyes have. To see without illusion is to finally meet existence on its own terms, not as you wish it to be, but as it is, vast, indifferent, radiant. And in that meeting, something ancient within you recognizes itself. Have you ever felt this moment, when the fabric of your certainty tore and life became too real to explain? Tell me in the comments, because it's in that unraveling that truth finally enters. Awareness always comes with a cost. The wider your perception grows, the heavier it becomes to carry. When consciousness expands, it doesn't only reveal beauty, it exposes the unbearable complexity of existence. You start to feel everything at once, the tenderness and cruelty of humanity, the birth and decay woven into every moment, the fragile balance between creation and destruction. You no longer have the privilege of ignorance. Every emotion, every injustice, every silence vibrates through you. The world, once distant, now lives inside your chest. At first, this expansion feels like illumination. Then it turns into gravity. You realize that to see deeply is also to suffer deeply. Jung understood this paradox, that the light of awareness always casts a shadow. The more you perceive, the more you feel the pain of what consciousness reveals, the collective fear, the unconscious cruelty, the hidden sorrow of being alive. The mind struggles to hold so much truth. The heart, overwhelmed by empathy, begins to ache with a sadness that has no clear source. It's not your pain alone, it's the pain of being aware. But within this burden lies something sacred. The weight of consciousness is also the proof of connection. You suffer not because you are broken, but because you are open. The soul learns through sensitivity. It's as if existence itself entrusted you with its rawness, asking you to hold a fragment of its infinite feeling. And while this heaviness can isolate, it also refines. It polishes the self into sincerity. You stop seeking comfort and start seeking truth, even when it hurts. The task is not to escape the weight, but to grow strong enough to carry it with grace, to realize that awareness is not punishment, it's participation. You are no longer outside life observing. You are inside it, feeling every pulse of its mystery. If you've ever felt this, the ache of seeing too much, knowing too deeply, share it in the comments. Sometimes, what feels like burden is simply the soul remembering its true size. After the initial blaze of awareness, there comes a silence so vast it feels like loss. Awakening, for all its brilliance, leaves behind a strange emptiness, the hollow space where illusions used to live. The beliefs that once gave you comfort no longer hold weight, and the desires that used to guide you now feel shallow. You look around and realize that the scaffolding of your old self has crumbled. What remains is a wide, echoing stillness. This is not depression, though it can feel like it. It's the soul adjusting to the absence of lies. The mind panics in this void. It wants to rebuild something, anything, and to fill the silence with meaning. But no new philosophy fits. No new distraction satisfies. Jung described this phase as the night of the soul, where the ego, having lost its familiar ground, hovers between death and rebirth. The emptiness is not a punishment, it's a purification. It clears the noise so that something authentic can emerge, something that isn't borrowed from the world. In this quiet space, everything that is false begins to decay. You feel detached from others, misunderstood, maybe even invisible. But beneath that detachment, a deeper intimacy is forming, not with people, but with existence itself. You begin to sense life not as an idea, but as a living presence moving through you. There's no longer a separation between inner and outer, self and world. You are simply here, naked in awareness. The emptiness after awakening is the womb of transformation. It asks for patience, for trust. What feels like absence is actually potential, the field where a truer consciousness takes root. The ego calls it void, the soul calls it home. If you've ever touched this silent emptiness, that in-between place where everything you believed dissolves, share it. In the comments, you are not broken. You are becoming transparent. And in that transparency, existence begins to recognize itself through you. Carl Jung's journey into the invisible was not a metaphor, it was an ordeal. When he stepped beyond the boundaries of intellect and entered the depths of his own psyche, he crossed into a realm that few dare to approach consciously. There, he found not theories, but living symbols, forms of intelligence that spoke through dreams, visions, and archetypes. What he discovered shattered every illusion of control. The unconscious was not a passive background, it was a vast, breathing reality, the other half of existence that humanity endlessly tries to ignore. In the Red Book, Jung recorded his descent into this inner world. He encountered images that terrified him: gods, serpents, oceans of blood, voices whispering from the roots of being. He understood that these were not hallucinations, but expressions of a deeper order. the psyche, communicating in the language of myth. What he called the invisible real was not external, it was the unseen architecture of consciousness itself. By facing it, Jung realized that the boundary between the psychological and the spiritual is an illusion. The unconscious is not beneath us, it is around us, within us, infinite. To confront this invisible real is to recognize that existence is not what the senses reveal. Every event, every emotion, every encounter is the meeting of visible and invisible forces. We are shaped by what we do not see. Most flee from this truth, preferring the safety of certainty. But Jung's courage was to look directly into the unknown, to let it speak through him without trying to tame it. In doing so, he became a bridge between the ordinary and the eternal. You too have glimpsed this invisible dimension in your dreams, your grief, your inexplicable moments of knowing. The invitation is the same, to stop dismissing what you cannot explain and begin listening to it. If you've ever sensed the presence of something vast behind your thoughts, leave a comment. Maybe that's not imagination. Maybe that's the invisible real calling you to remember. Once awareness opens, it refuses to close. You can try to return to old distractions, to rebuild the comforting routines that once protected you. But something inside won't comply anymore. The illusion that used to cradle you now feels transparent. You watch yourself trying to pretend, to believe, again in the small dramas of the world, yet the effort feels hollow. The soul has tasted something vast and ordinary life can no longer contain it. This is the quiet tragedy of awakening. You lose the ability to forget. Jung understood this well. He wrote that, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The awakening mind becomes painfully sensitive to everything, to falseness, to suffering, to the way people hide from themselves. You can't unsee it, you can't unknow it." And so begins the long initiation into lucidity, the challenge of living among the asleep without falling back into their dream. You start to realize that most conversations are performances, most ambitions are escapes, and much of what passes for happiness is avoidance wearing a smile. At times you'll wish you could go back to simplicity, to certainty, to the comfort of not knowing. But you can't. Once you've seen the machinery behind the world, the play can no longer seduce you. You start searching for something different, not entertainment, but essence. Not stimulation, but stillness. You crave truth more than comfort, even when truth hurts. Yet this impossibility is also grace. The inability to return is what keeps the soul evolving. You no longer belong to the past because you've become too real for it. The sleep was soft, but it was also suffocating. Now even pain feels alive. Even silence vibrates with meaning. You've crossed a threshold, and life itself has claimed you. If you've ever felt this, the ache of being awake in a sleeping world, share it in the comments. How do you carry the awareness you can't unsee? Because awakening isn't a choice anymore. It's the path you now walk, eyes open, heart trembling, but alive. There is a pain that only those who have truly seen can understand, a subtle, relentless ache that lives between awareness and helplessness, the wound of lucidity. Once your eyes have opened to the deeper patterns of life, you start to perceive the suffering that hides beneath the surface of everything, the loneliness behind laughter, the fear behind ambition, the quiet despair behind order. You feel the heartbeat of the collective, and it hurts. Clarity becomes both gift and burden, because you now see not only beauty, but the unbearable cost of being conscious. Jung knew this wound well. He understood that awakening does not free you from suffering. It deepens your capacity to feel it. The light of awareness exposes what darkness kept hidden, and sometimes that light burns. You realize how fragile humanity truly is, how much of what we call civilization is built to keep us from feeling. You watch people run from silence, drown in noise, cling to distraction, and you recognize yourself in them. The wound is not separation from others, it's union with their pain. At first, this sensitivity feels unbearable. You might long to close your heart again, to numb the empathy that makes you bleed for a world that rarely looks back. But this ache is sacred. It's the proof that you are awake. It's the pulse of consciousness moving through you, reminding you that to be alive is to participate in everything: joy, grief, chaos, love. Lucidity does not destroy innocence, it transforms it into compassion. The task is not to heal this wound, but to live through it consciously, to let it refine you instead of break you, to hold pain without turning bitter, to stay open even when the heart trembles. Because this sensitivity, this unbearable tenderness, is the very doorway through which wisdom enters. If you've felt this wound, if awareness has made you both softer and stronger, share it in the comments. How do you carry it? What keeps you open when it hurts to feel? Maybe that too is the hidden purpose of lucidity, to teach us that pain is not the opposite of light, but its evidence. Every pain you have endured was never meaningless. It was material, the raw substance from which consciousness refines itself. The soul is an alchemist, and its crucible is experience. What breaks you also teaches you. What wounds you also awakens you. In the beginning, suffering feels like punishment. Later, you understand it was preparation. Jung saw this clearly. The path of individuation, of becoming whole, is not a path around pain, but through it. The fire that burns the false self is the same fire that reveals the true one. Suffering forces you inward. It strips away illusion, control, and the comfort of borrowed truths. You begin to see that every emotional collapse, every betrayal, every loss carries encoded information about who you really are. Pain introduces you to your limits, but also to your depth. When you finally stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" transformation begins. Awareness turns agony into insight. Reflection turns grief into grace. You start to notice that the very emotions you feared most are the ones capable of freeing you. This is the essence of inner alchemy. Nothing is wasted. Every tear becomes fuel for understanding. Every fall becomes foundation for strength. Slowly, suffering changes texture, from sharp to sacred. You no longer resist it. You listen to it. It stops defining you and starts refining you. The ego mourns its losses, but the soul celebrates the truth uncovered beneath them. Pain, once seen through the eyes of consciousness, transforms into wisdom, silent, humble, and radiant. True wisdom doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't claim certainty. It simply looks at life with unflinching tenderness, knowing that everything, or even sorrow, serves the unfolding of the whole. If you felt this quiet transmutation within you, where what once hurt now illuminates, share it in the comments. Because wisdom isn't born from perfection. It's born from those who dared to suffer consciously and kept their hearts open through the fire. After the fire of transformation, there comes a quiet, unlike anything you've known before. It's not the numbness that follows exhaustion, but a deeper stillness, a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. This serenity isn't achieved, it's revealed, like calm water settling after a storm. You stop needing life to make sense. You stop arguing with what is. Awareness, once a blade, becomes a soft light. You no longer chase understanding, you simply witness. Those who see deeply are not free from pain. They have just stopped resisting it. They've learned to let existence flow through them, without clinging to its highs or fighting its lows. The world continues, loud, chaotic, unpredictable, yet something in them remains unmoved. It's not detachment born of indifference, but of intimacy. When you've touched the core of suffering, you begin to feel compassion for everything that exists, because you see how fragile and holy it all is. This is the serenity of those who see, not withdrawal, but unconditional participation. Jung understood that the goal of consciousness was not perfection, but balance. When opposites reconcile within you, shadow and light, chaos and order, love and loss, the inner war dissolves. You become spacious enough to hold contradiction without breaking. You start to sense a silent harmony beneath the noise of the world, a rhythm that unites all things. Even tragedy becomes part of the music. This serenity doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. You act, but without panic. You love, but without possession. You speak, but only when words serve truth. The awakened no longer seek control, they trust the current. They know that what flows through them is the same force that moves the stars. If you've touched this stillness, that quiet clarity that survives every storm, share it in the comments. Because serenity is not an escape from life. It's the moment you finally belong to it completely. In the end, awakening reveals itself not as triumph, but as tenderness. You realize that the cost of touching the true nature of existence was never about losing comfort. It was about losing illusion. Everything you thought would complete you falls away, and what remains is startlingly simple. Presence. The gift hidden inside the pain, the loss, the silence, is this: you have become real. You no longer live through memory or anticipation. You breathe with life as it happens. Nothing is missing, because nothing is separate. The hidden gift of awakening is paradoxical. It breaks you open, only to show that you were never broken. It strips away certainty, only to reveal a deeper trust. You discover that peace was not on the other side of struggle. It was the space beneath it, waiting all along. Jung understood this. The goal of individuation was not to become perfect, but whole, to embrace the divine and the human, the known and the unknowable until they are one. This wholeness carries a quiet joy, not the ecstatic joy of escape, but the grounded joy of belonging. You start to feel gratitude for everything, even the darkness that once terrified you, because now you see what it was for. It was teaching you how to see. You begin to live lightly, not because life has grown easier, but because you no longer fight it. Every breath becomes prayer, every silence, revelation. The same world that once seemed unbearable now feels sacred in its imperfection, and so the awakening completes its circle. You return to the world, not as a seeker, but as a presence. You no longer search for truth. You embody it, and from that embodiment everything changes, quietly, invisibly, like dawn arriving after a long night. If you've walked this far with me, you've touched something rare, the place where awareness meets wonder. Leave a comment and tell me what truth this journey awakened in you. Like the video, subscribe and stay close, because awakening is not an ending. It's the beginning of seeing everything, again, for the first time.